The hotel parking lot was almost full. Luxury SUVs lined one side, and a brand new electric sedan stood proudly near the entrance, reflecting the warm evening lights. Then, almost unnoticed, an old silver Honda Accord quietly rolled into the last empty parking space. Its paint had faded over the years, and a few small scratches decorated the rear bumper. It wasn't the kind of car that made people stop and stare. The driver turned off the engine and rested both hands on the steering wheel for a moment. His name was Ethan, and tonight was his 20-year college reunion. As he looked around at the expensive vehicles surrounding him, a familiar thought crossed his mind. Maybe I should have rented something newer. The thought lasted only a few seconds. He smiled, picked up the small gift he had brought for the reunion host, stepped out of the car, and walked confidently toward the hotel entrance. 3 hours later, the parking lot looked exactly the same. But Ethan no longer saw those expensive cars the way he had before. During dinner, he had learned something that nobody could see from the outside. The man driving the newest luxury SUV quietly admitted that he had refinanced it twice just to keep up with the monthly payments. Another classmate confessed that he'd upgraded his truck every 4 years for almost 2 decades and still owed more than it was worth. Someone else admitted that his family hadn't taken a proper vacation in years, because every extra dollar disappeared into car payments. Meanwhile, the oldest car in the parking lot belonged to the only person in the room who didn't owe a single dollar on a vehicle. It wasn't because Ethan earned the highest salary, and it certainly wasn't because he had been lucky. Years earlier, he had simply made one quiet financial decision that most people laughed at. He refused to replace a car that was still doing its job. Most people believe that income determines wealth, but that's rarely the complete story. What quietly drains your money often matters far more than what you earn. The car sitting in your driveway tells a story, but not the story most people think. When people see an expensive vehicle, they immediately assume the owner is successful. Sometimes that's true, but more often it simply means someone qualified for a loan. There is a huge difference between looking wealthy and actually becoming wealthy, and the surprising part is that very few people notice the difference until decades later. Today, we're going to discover why many financially successful people continue driving cars that most people would ignore, and why one ordinary decision, keeping a perfectly good vehicle, can quietly build more wealth than many popular side hustles ever could. Most people judge success in less than 5 seconds. They don't ask how much you've invested. They don't ask how much you've saved, or whether your home is completely paid off. Instead, they glance at your driveway and immediately form an opinion. A luxury vehicle creates one assumption. An older sedan creates another. The problem is that cars are terrible at measuring wealth because a car only shows ownership. It never shows obligation. 2 neighbors can drive identical luxury SUVs. One may have paid cash after years of disciplined investing, while the other may have signed an 84-month loan with almost nothing down. From the outside, they appear exactly the same. Inside their bank accounts, their financial lives couldn't be more different. Modern financing has made expensive cars available to almost everyone. Instead of asking whether they can truly afford a $50,000 vehicle, people simply ask whether they can handle a $700 monthly payment. Those are completely different questions. One protects your future. The other often mortgages it. Banks understand this better than anyone. That's why advertisements rarely focus on the total cost of a car. Instead, they highlight the monthly payment because smaller numbers feel less intimidating. $700 each month doesn't sound overwhelming at first, but over 6 or 7 years, that payment quietly consumes tens of thousands of dollars that could have been building your future instead. Most people never notice because the money disappears 1 month at a time. Here's something almost every dealership already knows. The most expensive day of owning a brand new car is the very first day. The moment you drive it away from the dealership, its value immediately begins to fall. Not because you damaged it, not because anything stopped working, but simply because it is no longer new. Imagine buying a brand new vehicle for $50,000. Just 1 year later, it may already be worth $10,000 less. Nothing broke. Nothing failed. You simply paid a premium for being the first owner. Now imagine repeating that same decision every 4 or 5 years. Every upgrade feels exciting. New technology, new features, and that unmistakable new car smell make it feel worthwhile. But underneath those emotions, the same financial cycle quietly repeats itself. Buy, lose value. Trade it in. Start all over again. Most drivers never realize they're restarting the most expensive years of ownership every single time they upgrade. Meanwhile, someone like Ethan experiences that depreciation only once. Once the loan is finally paid off, something remarkable begins to happen. The payment disappears, not for 1 month or even 1 year, but sometimes for 5, 7, or even 10 years. Those payment-free years rarely receive attention. Nobody congratulates you for driving the same dependable car another year. Your friends won't compliment your 12-year-old sedan, and social media certainly won't celebrate it. But your bank account notices every single month because money that doesn't leave your account has an incredible habit. It stays. And once it stays, it can finally begin working for you instead of someone else. Asterisk, think about 2 friends who begin their careers at exactly the same time. They earn the same salary, work for the same company, and even buy similar reliable cars during their first year of employment. For the first few years, their financial lives look almost identical. Then, 5 years later, one of them walks into a dealership. He trades in his perfectly reliable vehicle, signs another long-term loan, and drives home in a brand new luxury SUV with a huge smile on his face. The second friend makes a different decision. His old car still starts every morning, the engine runs smoothly, maintenance is affordable, and it gets him everywhere he needs to go. So instead of replacing it, he simply keeps driving it. From the outside, it looks like one friend is moving forward while the other has fallen behind. But financially, something very different is happening beneath the surface. Every month, the first friend continues making another car payment. Every month, the second friend suddenly has a choice. He can spend that money on things he doesn't really need, or he can quietly save it and invest it for his future. That's the difference most people never see. Cars naturally lose value over time, while investments have historically grown over long periods. One slowly shrinks, while the other quietly expands. Time simply magnifies whichever direction your money is moving. Ethan never considered himself a financial genius. He wasn't chasing risky investments or searching for the next big opportunity. He simply treated his car as a tool instead of a trophy. Once his loan was paid off, the money that had once disappeared into monthly payments began building something far more valuable than a newer vehicle. It became an emergency fund. It grew into retirement savings. It slowly turned into investments that continued working long after he stopped thinking about them. None of this happened overnight. There wasn't one magical day when he suddenly felt rich. Instead, every ordinary month quietly stacked on top of the previous one, creating a future that looked completely different from the lives of many people around him. That's why wealth often goes unnoticed. We celebrate expensive purchases because they're easy to see. We rarely notice years of consistent financial discipline because it happens silently. A luxury vacation attracts attention. A brand new sports car attracts attention. But someone who quietly invests every month usually attracts none at all until 20 years later, when people begin wondering how they became financially secure. Whenever this topic comes up, someone always asks the same question. What about repairs? It's a fair question because older cars absolutely require maintenance. Tires eventually wear out. Batteries stop working. Brakes need replacing. Every now and then, something expensive might break unexpectedly. But the real question isn't whether repairs cost money. The real question is compared to what? Imagine spending $2,000 on repairs during a single year. At first, that sounds expensive. But compare it to paying $8,000 or $9,000 every year in car payments, higher insurance costs, registration fees, and the constant depreciation of a newer vehicle. Suddenly, those repairs don't seem nearly as painful. The reason repairs feel so expensive is because you pay for them all at once. Monthly payments feel harmless because they're spread out over time. But your bank account doesn't care whether money leaves all at once or little by little every month. The total cost is what matters, and surprisingly often, maintaining a dependable older vehicle costs far less than replacing it, of course. This doesn't mean you should drive every car forever. There comes a point when replacing a vehicle becomes the smartest financial decision. If repairs become constant, if reliability disappears, or if your family's safety depends on newer technology, then buying another car makes perfect sense. The difference isn't whether you buy another vehicle. The difference is why you're buying it. One purchase is based on necessity. The other is based on comparison. Those two decisions may look exactly the same to everyone else, but financially, they lead to completely different destinations. Many people replace perfectly reliable cars long before they actually need to, because excitement begins to fade, or because they feel pressure after seeing what other people are driving. Today's vehicles are built to last much longer than many people realize when they're properly maintained. Routine oil changes, regular inspections, and fixing small problems before they become expensive ones can add years to a vehicle's life. Every extra payment-free year quietly strengthens your financial future, even if nobody else notices. Here's a question worth asking yourself. When you imagine buying your next car, who are you really trying to impress? Most people believe they're making the decision for themselves. But if we're honest, there's usually an invisible audience somewhere in the back of our minds. Maybe it's neighbors. Maybe it's coworkers, friends, or family members. We imagine what they'll think when they see us driving something new. The funny thing is, those same people are usually too busy worrying about their own lives to spend more than a few seconds thinking about your car. Yet many people sacrifice years of financial freedom for a moment of approval that disappears almost instantly. That's an incredibly expensive trade. Truly wealthy people eventually stop performing for that invisible audience. Instead of asking, "What will people think?" they begin asking a much more powerful question. What will this decision cost me 5 years from now? That single question has the power to change almost every financial decision you'll ever make. Asterisk, there is one mistake people often make after hearing ideas like these. They assume the lesson is to never buy another new car. That isn't true at all. Sometimes replacing your vehicle is absolutely the right decision. If your current car has become unreliable, if it constantly leaves you stranded, if repair costs continue climbing every year, or if newer safety features could better protect your family, then buying another car is a practical decision. The important question isn't whether you're buying a new vehicle. It's why you're buying it. One decision is driven by necessity. The other is driven by comparison. Those two choices may look exactly the same from the outside, but they lead to completely different financial futures. Someone who saves patiently for years before upgrading isn't making the same decision as someone replacing a perfectly reliable car simply because everyone else seems to be doing it. One person is buying transportation. The other is buying approval. And approval is one of the most expensive things people ever pay for. A few months after the reunion, Ethan met one of his former classmates for coffee. As they sat by the window talking about life, careers, and family, his friend smiled and asked, "So, have you finally replaced that old Honda?" Ethan laughed softly and shook his head. "Not yet," he replied. His friend looked surprised. "I honestly don't know how you still drive that thing." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't try to defend his decision. Instead, he asked a simple question. "How much is your monthly payment now?" His friend looked down at his coffee for a moment, before quietly answering, "About $800. Ethan nodded, without saying anything else. After a brief silence, he asked another question. "If nobody ever saw your car, if no friends, neighbors, co-workers, or strangers ever noticed what you drove, would you still buy the exact same vehicle?" His friend stared out the window, thinking carefully. This time, there was no quick answer. Deep down, he already knew the truth. Many of the biggest purchases people make aren't really about the product itself. They're about the image they hope to create. They imagine success, admiration, and respect arriving the moment they drive something newer. But those feelings rarely last, while the payments often remain for years. Think about the advertisements you see every day. A luxury SUV climbs effortlessly through the mountains. A sports car races along a beautiful coastline at sunset. The driver is always smiling. The road is always empty. Everything looks exciting, peaceful, and perfect. But those advertisements never show the monthly payment. They never show the insurance bill arriving in the mailbox. They never show the years of depreciation quietly reducing the vehicle's value. They never show someone working overtime just to keep making the payments. Advertising sells a feeling. Reality sends the invoice. That's why so many people mistake ownership for success. But real success isn't driving something expensive. Real success is having the freedom to make choices without being controlled by debt. That's a very different kind of wealth. Several years passed, and Ethan's old Honda crossed 200,000 miles. Most people assumed it wouldn't last much longer, but every morning it started without hesitation. It continued carrying him to work, bringing groceries home, visiting friends, and taking his family wherever they needed to go. It wasn't exciting anymore, but it remained dependable. During those same years, the money he wasn't spending on monthly car payments quietly continued building his future. His savings grew. His investments became larger. Most importantly, he enjoyed something that couldn't be bought at any dealership: peace of mind. He slept well, knowing that one unexpected expense wouldn't destroy his finances because he had prepared for moments like that long before they arrived. One Saturday morning, something special happened. Ethan's daughter had just turned 18 and had been accepted into college. Like many young adults, she worried about transportation and assumed she would need to save for years before buying her first car. Instead, Ethan walked outside, holding a small envelope. Inside was a single set of car keys. She looked up with surprise as he smiled and pointed toward the driveway. Parked there was the same old Honda Accord. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have the newest technology or luxury features. But it was reliable, well-maintained, and completely paid for. There were no monthly payments waiting for her. No debt, no financial pressure. It represented something much more valuable than a luxury vehicle ever could. It represented freedom. While many parents help their children begin adulthood with years of debt, Ethan gave his daughter something different. He gave her a head start. Instead of worrying about loan payments, she could focus on building her education, her career, and her future. Sometimes the greatest financial gift isn't money. Sometimes it's removing unnecessary debt before it ever begins. The funny thing is that most people driving past that old Honda would never know its story. They would simply see an old car. They wouldn't see the years of payments that never happened. They wouldn't see the investments quietly growing in the background. They wouldn't see the financial stress that never existed because one simple decision had changed everything. That's the strange thing about real wealth. It often looks completely ordinary. It rarely asks for attention. It doesn't need compliments or admiration because its greatest reward isn't impressing strangers. Its greatest reward is peace, freedom, and the ability to live life on your own terms. So the next time you find yourself comparing your car to someone else's, pause for just a moment and ask yourself one simple question. Am I looking at wealth, or am I simply looking at debt? From the outside, you'll never truly know. And maybe that's exactly the lesson. Real wealth isn't measured by what sits in your driveway. It's measured by what stays in your bank account. It's measured by the freedom to say yes to opportunities and no to unnecessary pressure. It's measured by sleeping peacefully at night because your future isn't tied to another monthly payment. The world will always encourage you to upgrade, replace, and impress. But some of the smartest financial decisions you'll ever make will seem incredibly ordinary. Driving the same dependable car. Ignoring the pressure to compete. Choosing long-term freedom instead of short-term attention. Those decisions may never earn applause, but years from now, they might give you something far more valuable than admiration. They might give you a life that truly belongs to you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more practical lessons about money, freedom, and the quiet habits that build lasting wealth. Because sometimes, the smartest financial decision you'll ever make is the one almost nobody notices.